anybody now that you kind of respect, or maybe does influence you slightly?
Yeah, I mean, there's loads of people.
Kind of young and upcoming comedians you've seen recently that you recommend?
There are loads and loads of brilliant people, and it's kind of interesting because I think quite a lot of them are sort of semi-influenced by either me or Stu or both of us. But then actually going to see their shows now reminds you a little bit of what was good about you 10 years ago. You know, reminds you of things you can do. And I think like with this show, I'd seen a few people, people like Josie Long and Terry Saunders, and I mean, there's a lot of people. There's obviously Daniel Kitson, and who, you know, is quite established. But there's a lot of very sweet and lyrical kind of new generation comedian. And in fact, in the stand-up circuit, I fit in so much better than I did in the early 1990s, where it was a lot about jokes and stick swinging, basically, and comedians telling gags. And now there's a kind of lyricism to...
I was going to say that. I mean, I've noticed recently there is a lot of sentimentality, especially with Kitson and even Stuart Lee's recent one as well.
But, you know, it's nice. It's nice to be able to explore that side. Izzy Sooty's great, who's you might have seen in Peep Show. And, you know, there's a lot of really great people coming through. And it's kind of nice to be gigging with them. You know, what's been a really great thing for me is doing the stand-up circuit again the last 5 years. So you're seeing other comedians and you're getting an idea of what's going on now. And I think, you know, a lot of more successful comedians, because they never go back to that once they've left behind, more kind of, you know, having a bigger career, miss out on seeing where comedy is now and what's going on. And so they might come back and do a big tour and be hopelessly out of touch and do material that people have been doing 10 years ago, you know, that's just obvious. And so it's good to be at the kind of coalface and seeing what people are doing. So yeah, I think it's a two-way street, and I think they certainly have influenced people. But there's, you know, there's so many good people. Russell Howard's actually just a great, you know, I'm not sure Mock the Week shows any of those people in the best light really, but he's a just really inventive, exciting stand-up comedian. And John Richardson, and I mean loads. I mean, there's just so many people. I couldn't begin to name them all.
A bit more about your style. You've kind of developed this thing of stretching out. I mean, this show is a lot shorter, I noticed, but you've kind of developed this kind of style of stretching out routines to just the extreme. Was that something consciously that you did, or was that something that just developed naturally over time?
I think it was something we were always interested in. I mean, I think we both, me and Stu, who tend to do the same thing, were very influenced by a comedian called Ted Chippington in the mid-80s, or probably earlier, who did just deconstructing jokes, you know, and would stretch them out unnaturally long. And one of the first things I did at college was to do a long 30-minute routine where I just kept on doing, basically my wife went to Jamaica jokes about different things, but just really making the most tortuous pun possible out of the place name that people suggested, so I was making up at the time, but it would go on for so long. So, you know, we were interested in that, and we were just interested in, and we were always interested in deconstructing comedy, and that's the kind of way to do it. But I also like to take, I think what's slightly different about Stu will tend to hammer an idea and not really change it, but just hammer and hammer and hammer, and that's kind of what turns it into something amazing and strange, is that it's just constant repetition. Whereas my stuff will usually be taking an idea and going with it a bit in flights of fancy with it really rough, so it will develop, you know, even if it's much too long to be talking about one subject, like yogurts or a t-shirt or whatever, it will progress, and you'll explore, and I'll explore every possible avenue and squeeze everything out of it. And but it's about, you know, it's about doing it in front of, I mean, I like the fact that, you know, you've got an audience there, so use that in some sense. So, you know, you're using their reaction, you're trying to shock them in some way to make them think about why they think about whatever they think about whatever subject, you know. So the kind of paedophile thing, it is about making people think about their attitudes to, you know, fantasy, and to whether, you know, whether paedophiles are necessarily evil, or whether they're, you know, there's some, you know, whether we should be helping them or whatever, and you do it in a fantastical way that is quite shocking and deliberately takes things further and further, you know. And then hopefully people come on board with it and understand it, and not everyone gets it. To be honest, the show you saw is a slightly shorter show because I was doing 2 shows today, so it is a bit of a longer show. But with extra bits in rather than really stretching an idea. So, you know, this show's about, you know, this show's more about telling a story and telling stories. So it isn't so much about stretching something out, but, you know, some days I might take the conversation between me and the younger me a bit further, which is reminiscent of some other self-conversations I've had in recent shows, you know, which is what I used to do. You know, and it's just fun to see where things go, and to lose an audience, try and get them back, to dig yourself into a hole and see if you can get out of it. Yeah. And, you know, when you find with live work, especially with an audience that doesn't know you, that's a really exciting thing and a dangerous thing, and sometimes it goes horribly wrong. And sometimes it's just brilliant. So,
I was going to ask about it, because your last few shows have had kind of improvised section as well, like the 2 old men and the hotel scene. Yeah. I was just wondering if there's any kind of notable examples of where that went particularly wrong. Or
I mean, there's one on the DVD of the old men on the bonfire where someone leaves and takes exception to it, and because I'm in character, I have to be the two men, and I really lay into this guy. I think he heckles or something, and I really lay in. That's what happened. He heckles, I really lay into him. But it's on the extras of, I guess it's Menage a Une, I think there's that show. And but every now and again you have a gig that goes horribly wrong because, and people don't like you joking about paedophilia sometimes when you go to a club. They just don't even like you talking about it because they think it's not a fit subject for comedy, which I think, I think everything's, if you can find the right way through, it's better to talk about stuff than not talk about things, and to work out why we have that reaction to it, and to create that reaction to find out why. So, most of the shows I do, and this show less than the last 2 or 3, but most of them have kind of been largely improvised on stage from going on with an idea. But there's definitely things in this. I think I pretty much wrote the first section, which is quite theatrical and quite, mock heroic, and I pretty much wrote it and then over some performances kind of battered it down. But there's things in it that I can't quite work out how I wrote. The language is just kind of perfect, and it's developed and evolved over doing it. And you've thrown in a word that I sometimes go, oh, I don't know, I knew that word almost, but you've forgotten you knew it, or the night you threw it in, you'd read it somewhere else or whatever, So the show is constantly evolving. This show less so than maybe the other ones, because it's a story and I've got to get to certain places. But it's the stage time is often the most fecund place to write and create stuff. You take an idea and go with it, and if you hit your stride and you hit the right point with the audience, you can just create a routine that you might have struggled to sit at home and write. Sometimes I sit down and write a blog and write something that comes out as a perfect routine, more or less, start to finish. But it's slightly about letting go of a part of yourself, I think, creating comedy. Yeah. And it's partly about, Dara Breen compares it to that thing in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy where flying is about falling and forgetting that you're forgetting that gravity exists or whatever, to distract yourself. I think is what is the bit, and it is, you get distracted and you find this pure little place where suddenly comedy is great. And I guess the podcast is that as well, I think the interesting thing about the podcast is you see absolutely everything with that. So you see when it doesn't work, and you see when, you see the days when we're not in form, and you see the days when I am in form or we are in form. And so you get the kind of mechanics of it, and it's kind of incredible to me that we managed to get at least one really funny thing in every podcast. Because realistically, I'm sitting down with no idea what we're going to talk about. Yeah. And Andrew sometimes has looked at the papers, but I don't even really look at the papers now.